being said, we are going to get into the opening statements. We're going to start with Eli. So, Eli, whenever you are ready for your opening statement, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Sounds good. Thanks again, Easy, for having me. I just really appreciate it. It's an awesome opportunity, and thanks to Mr. Peterson for doing this with me. So, yeah, I'm arguing that TAG debunks atheism. So what TAG is the transcendental argument for God. It goes like this. If X is a necessary precondition for Y therefore X. That's the form of a transcendental argument. In this case, if God is a necessary precondition for knowledge and the transcendental categories that make knowledge possible, such as truth, logic, meaning, information, the self, numbers, if we have those things, therefore God exists. But this isn't just a claim. There's an argument to back it up. The argument is found within the ontological status of these things that we see. If we can see that they are immaterial, universal, invariant, and conceptual, you need a grounding point that is immaterial, universal, invariant, and conceptual. And this is done within the grounding of the Christian God in my worldview. But in this case, really all we need to debunk atheism is an immaterial, universal mind that created the world. This works through divine conceptualism. If God had the idea for the world in his mind and then instantiated that idea through creation, similar to if I have an idea for a home, I have the idea in my head and it exists as an idea, but then it is instantiated materially when I build the home. Now, this is a paradigm level argument. So we are comparing two paradigms, not just any certain point in a vacuum. So when this is brought up against the atheist worldview, which I am taking as any worldview that says there's a possibility that God is not the necessary precondition for these things, you have to look at what kind of metaphysic can actually do the grounding work for the categories that I presented. What kind of metaphysic is necessary to have immaterial, universal, invariant, and conceptual law-like regularities in nature, things that we ground truth in, that we ground all of our meaningful predication in sentences. We look to the atheist worldview, one of empiricism, sometimes materialism, physicalism, depends on what flavor of atheism you're working with. But within their worldview, they appeal to things that have universality, things that have regularity. They appeal to notions of truth and laws of logic that require absolute truth, while within their own worldview, there's no metaphysic that can actually account for this. The grounding and starting point they take as presuppositions and axioms. I have a presupposition too. It would be God. In this case, their presupposition is that logic works. We have it. We use it. So we start our worldview from this assumption and then work forward, not recognizing that in order for something like that to be possible, the world has to be aligned a certain way. A very important point is that I think that what I mean is an argument that they'll use is that it's grounded in their mind, in their own personal experience. But our minds are a particular thing, and they can't ground a universal. And also, they're referencing something in the world. They'll say that the laws of logic, truth is a proposition or a description. But if you're referencing, it's a description of what? Something that's happening in the world. I would argue that this is a property of the regularity of nature. For example, I like to cite the law of identity, that an object is itself and not itself. Our thoughts don't make this the case. We don't create the laws of logic. We discover them. If this is in fact the case, then this regularity in nature existed before humans. This existed if you can have any type of citation of the past pre-human, or if all humans were to, drop dead, objects would still retain their identity over time. This is a regularity that is only presupposed and assumed in their worldview, especially if you look at something like Hume's guillotine that remarks about how probability and induction is actually completely unjustified in the atheist worldview. And this is like one of the godfathers of skeptical atheism making this argument. So this is where the problem lies, is you have notions of immaterial, universal, invariant concepts in a world of chaos and flux that can't actually ground them, and it can't be grounded in their own particular mind because it's universal. It can't be grounded in the physical because it's immaterial. But if it's conceptual, that requires a mind. So I also believe they're mind dependent. I believe they're dependent on the mind of God. So that would be basically the whole synopsis of the argument. Some common objections that I hear is that it's circular. All paradigmatic worldviews are circular at their ultimate epistemic foundation. There will always be a point of self-authenticating, self-referencing, but we actually have to be able to justify that. To just claim something is axiomatic or a presupposition is not enough, because, if I were to come to a debate where somebody said, this argument debunks Christianity, and I said, well, you know what, God is my axiom, God is my presupposition, so I don't have to defend it, it just is the case, that would not be sufficient. So we actually have to account for the entire worldview. Again, it's a comparison of worldviews, and which ones has the coherence, the explanatory power, the metaphysic to make the things we're appealing to work, not just what I would ultimately consider arbitrary starting points, arbitrary assumptions that make the worldview work, when the metaphysic and the entailments of the entire worldview actually don't make it work. So this is something I can demonstrate in argument, something that we'll be getting into. I can also demonstrate how this isn't possible in the atheist worldview. I can get into that through argumentation and the logical entailments of their position. What else do we got? I would say that while it's not entirely irrelevant to the conversation, I think that especially when I'm having a more of a discussion, not a debate with an atheist, I will say, look, we're looking for an immaterial universal mind that created the world. Now, which immaterial universal mind that created the world that is, has a point of relevancy, but I'm really looking for the argument from the atheist position, not a battle of, well, what if it's Islam? What if it's not Christianity? What if it's Spankyism, for example? I've seen a couple is that one. So, this is, while I think that the question of which God it is relevant, if the atheist doesn't even accept the necessity for any God, any immaterial universal mind that created the world at all as a precondition for these categories, then I think that it's not germane to this debate specifically. Definitely going to push for the atheist response, because what I've found is that it's actually not possible. In fact, we argue from the impossibility of the contrary, that you need this metaphysic in order to make this work. And with only 2 minutes and 42 seconds on the clock, I'm going to concede my time. That's about all I got.
No, you don't need 8 glasses of water a day. Yes, dogs do sweat. No, coal doesn't turn into diamonds. I've compiled hundreds of bits of information like that in Facts That Aren't True. Get your signed copy by going to the link in the description.
All right. Thank you for that opening statement. And with that, we'll hand the mic over to Planet Peterson. And whenever you're ready for your opening statement, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Sure. First, I want to say, hail Spanky, praise Spanky. I didn't plan on bringing up Spanky at all tonight, but that's really funny. So, okay. I just essentially have notes here, so this won't necessarily be the most elegant opening statement ever, but I'm going to do my best. The actual topic of the debate, which we can all see, it's down there, is that TAG debunks atheism. Now, to me, I don't think you can prove that something is wrong just by definition. I mean, if I could just make up a term and say, Zip Zop proves that blank exists or does not exist, or that blank is impossible. Now, that's just analytically true in this case, but nobody would accept that that actually has contributed to any kind of epistemology, because there's no way to tell the difference between making it up and if it's real, unless there's some sort of real investigation that we can take part in here. So I don't think that TAG debunks atheism, because it doesn't do any of that work. It challenges certain because it's just a worldview. It's just some presuppositions, which everybody has to have some. It challenges accounts for things like logic, reason, normativity. Sometimes this goes into can you even have knowledge? And that didn't get brought up in the opening statement, so I hope it doesn't go down that road, because I find that to be kind of a really boring version of it. Additional claims like logic, truth, reason, morality, they're objective, universal, invariant. Again, these are just the worldview claims that are built in. And these things allegedly require a grounding. The claim is that only a necessary, rational, immaterial mind, which would be a God, can do that. Therefore, atheism can't account for rationality. So TAG, it's not an empirical argument at all. It's like a metaphysical grounding. So I don't understand. We're going to have to, hopefully in the back and forth, we could get into how can you establish that you have proven something is false just by giving me your metaphysical grounding, because metaphysics is not provable. No metaphysical idea is really provable or disprovable, perhaps unless it like literally contains a logical contradiction. And the biggest problems with TAG are that it is literally just a starting point. It literally is just presuppositions, and it assumes what it is trying to prove. And then the whole idea about appealing to God's existence, I just don't think that even can explain normativity, necessity, universal logic, because existence isn't a predicate. It contributes nothing to epistemology. Saying that God exists doesn't actually lift anything up. It's just a brute claim that terminates right then and there and does no additional work. So I took some notes during the opening statement here, so I'll just kind of respond to them, and then maybe for the rebuttal, my opponent can respond to, my responses. If X is a necessary precondition, Y, therefore X. If God is a necessary precondition for logic claims, etc., and we have them, then God exists. I highly suspect that this is affirming the consequent. I was kind of furiously typing it out, so I'd have to get that. I'll try to work on that a little more. But if the argument affirms the consequence, then it's not logically valid. It can't be guaranteed. There was also the claim: if God had an idea for the world and then instantiated the claim or instantiated that idea, and then the subject changed, so that thought was not finished. So I don't know what that's supposed to be, but I think the most damning and revealing thing about that is how it begins with if. If we're just imagining things, then we're not debunking anything simply just by imagining that something could be the case. My opponent here asked, does atheism contain a necessary fact that grounds the regularity of nature, truth, etc.? I can create whatever necessary fact I want. I could say nature, I could say reality, I could say the universe is the necessary precondition for it, for no more or less arbitrary of a reason than declaring that God, which is determined to remain invisible in every single way, which is why we can't do any empirical investigation into God. We can only define God's characteristics and then claim, therefore, blank, which is inconvenient. My opponent said that atheism has a presupposition, but that doesn't work. They start from an assumption and work forward. Is that not exactly what you are doing by giving the TAG argument? It would be really weird if atheists were for some reason not allowed to do this, or if it would be invalid or illogical for atheists to do exactly what you're doing. Another statement that was said was, whatever atheists apply to, it pre-exists humans. So like the ground, like maybe an atheist takes a Neoplatonic concept of these things, so they exist eternally or whatever. Maybe they ground it in nature, the universe and its physical constants or whatever have been around for the entire history of the universe, which predates humans. That was said by my opponent here, and then he went on to say, it's only assumed or presupposed. Well, again, is that not exactly what you do? So if atheists aren't allowed to do these things, then I don't understand what we're really even doing here, or what makes the other position privileged in any way. The only couple things that I was able to write down that I heard were, my opponent claimed that I just wrote claimed it can't be grounded. I'm assuming whatever we're appealing to for the ability for us to have intelligibility about the universe or to know things or whatever. Why can it not be grounded? I didn't hear any justification for that apart from impossibility of the contrary, which is just to say you're wrong because you can't be right, which is really not a very good strategy, I don't think, and doesn't actually determine anything. And the last thing was what I wrote down was you said something to the effect of, "I'm looking for a universal mind to ground the world." Well, okay, but an atheist wouldn't be doing that. So, I mean, and then you said if the atheist rejects this precondition, then it's not conducive to the debate, or germane is the word you used. I think conducive means about the same thing. I'm really curious as to why we would go there, why you would have a debate with an atheist if you're going to tell the atheist, look, we're here to debate, and you think it is sourced in a different something other than a mind, but what I'm looking for is a mind. I was like, yeah, but your opponent disagrees with you on that. So if my position even can't be constructive for the debate, then I guess I just don't know why we think that, or why that was said, or why that was brought up. I am out of notes, so that's basically all I have.
All right. Thank you for that opening statement. With that, that's going to wrap up opening statements, and we're going to move into the 5-minute uninterrupted rebuttals. So we're going to hand the mic back to Eli. So, Eli, whenever you're ready for your 5-minute rebuttal, I will start the timer up with your voice.
Okay, sounds good. I will also confess that this is the first time that I didn't pre-write an opening statement. I was feeling cocky, and then we went live, and I got a little bit of the haven't been live in a while nerves. So I made a couple of mistakes in my delivery of my argument, but now that we're getting into it and I have some points to address, I think I can iron it out and make things a bit more clear. If I said if God is a necessary precondition, that was a mistake. That was not how I meant to use the transcendental argument. X is a necessary precondition for Y therefore X. Total language mistake on my part, but that it's not an if statement. So forgive me if we can scrub that. That was a total mistake. So it's God is the necessary precondition. X is the necessary precondition for Y therefore X. So what I'm asking for, what TAG is looking for, is a justification from the atheist position that can actually show how the why in this case is possible within their worldview. Given, and this is something that when we get into open dialogue, I want to clarify, is the position from Peterson that the ontological status of the conditions that make up the possibility of knowledge. I did actually in my opening statement reference knowledge and the transcendental categories that make it possible. So that's definitely where I'm going to go with it. It's things like truth, things like logic, meaning, information. All of those things are one part of the system of how anybody gets knowledge. I don't think you and I would deny that. And I think you would also agree that there's a retorsion aspect to, you can't deny logic, because to do so would be using logic. You can't say there is no truth, because that would be a truth claim. You see, what TAG is almost like another retorsion argument. That argument works for the atheist if they're going up against somebody that denies logic or truth wholesale. But what it doesn't do is explain that, okay, I grant that you use this. I don't think that, Planet Peterson is void of logic or reason, but I don't think that his worldview can give an account for it based on the ontological status of the categories that are in question. So when we compare the two worldviews, and you compare it to the theistic worldview that says, actually, we have one starting point, but this starting point gives a gives coherency, explanatory power, and a justification for the possibility of these things at all in relation to the ontological status, again, immaterial, universal, invariant, conceptual. in a universal, immaterial, invariant mind whose nature is ultimately the highest point of logic, the highest point of truth. When we get into the cross-examination of a worldview that posits that these things are possible without this being, without this God as a starting point, it's kind of like the retorsion argument, where if you try to say logic doesn't exist, well, you're using logic to do it. If you try to say that, well, yeah, I believe that logic is universal, but there's absolutely nothing in your worldview which could ground and justify something being universal at all, that's where the debunking comes in. So I wanted to clarify that, and I tried to write some notes about the other points. When I said he's making a starting point and going forward, yes, again, little bit of nerves. Of course, I'm doing the same thing. We all have epistemic foundation. What I'm saying is that what is picked as a presupposition or an axiom, or maybe not even picked, but deduced, it becomes arbitrary in their position, again, because it's not justified. Now, some might say it's a presupposition. By definition, it doesn't need to be justified. But when you're looking at something like a self-evident axiom, for example, you have to actually look at this and say, okay, this here is a self-evident principle, and there's other principles over here that aren't. Now, you've just created a criteria for this to be self-evident, and in your worldview, there has to be a justification for that move. I'm not saying that my opponent's doing this at all. We haven't gotten into the debate, but some things that I've heard is people act like saying something's an axiom or a presupposition is like putting a force field around it and saying it can no longer be critiqued. So, of course, we both have our starting points. What I'm saying is, if this is paradigmatic worldview comparisons, where we're taking the entire scope of the opponent's worldview into consideration, we do an internal critique, we compare the coherency, and there's 3 points of a worldview: metaphysics, ethics, and epistemology. And ours has a coherent justification for it, and the contrary, this is the impossibility of the contrary, it doesn't.
All right, thank you for that rebuttal. And with that, we're going to hand the mic back to Planet Peterson. Whenever you're ready for your rebuttal, I'll start the timer up with your voice.
Sure, maybe like 10 seconds because I'm just typing something. Don't feel like I'm going to beat you up over opening statements or anything. I'm not that kind of debater, so don't worry about it. And I'm probably going to make mistakes too, so just give me the same charity of not of not being a jerk about it. So I wrote down just a couple of ideas as we were going through this. This didn't really get brought up, but in my worldview, what I think is, I think we can have knowledge about things, even if I don't have an ultimate referent, a bedrock, brute, ontological grounding or whatever for something. I can still acquire knowledge about things. So ancient people knew all kinds of things about the natural world that were true, even though they didn't know the science that we know today. And if God exists, then presumably virtually all of the science we know today, like the very sophisticated physics, the biology, and the stuff we know about the weather, is still all true. Now, if you're going to claim that the fact that its existence or the ability to make those claims or whatever is grounded in God, or that he sustains it or instantiates it or whatever, then that doesn't actually undermine my ability to, devoid of using God in my formulation, come to any of that knowledge in a completely secular way. I don't think any Christian does Christian math or Christian science or Christian logic or anything like that when they do these things. So when we're retreating to the ultimate grounding of it as the account, again, what are we actually contributing to knowledge by doing that, and what are we actually proving that is false? Because certainly, even if God exists, the secular science is still true. So what exactly is going on there? There's an old, I can't remember, I think it was John Locke who mmade this argument. It might have been Kant, but I want to say it was John Locke. I don't remember exactly. But he makes the argument that, which I think is a pretty good way to undermine the presuppositionalist tactic, which is God would have to create humans with moral and logical instincts that they have on their own, that they can do on their own. Now, granted, it's given to us by God, but we purely use our own human reasoning, and God doesn't enter the equation anywhere in there. So it doesn't. We don't actually use God in the formulation. It's all just down to us. Because if that wasn't the case, then even if God exists, we couldn't know it. We couldn't know moral truths, or we couldn't know logical truths, and we could never come to the understanding that God exists. The only alternative to this is to say that God does do all of our thinking for us, which would make God's behavior pretty obviously immoral, I feel. So if purely by human reasoning we can do and understand these things, then I think that kind of does damage for the tag presupposition. Basically the only claim that was made that I wrote down was atheism doesn't have an ontological grounding. Again, I just don't think that that's really what would be the word? I don't know how you can really stand on that, because I could be a Neoplatonist. Platonism is absolutely a secular ontological grounding metaphysic. I could simply believe that moral facts exist, for example. I could ground it in the universe. That is an ontological thing that we exist, and I'll just arbitrarily label it as necessary. And I actually have a strong suspicion that some of these that what I'm laying out there kind of is the case. Separate ontological groundings for these things, even if God does exist, because does God know that murder is wrong? Well, then it's a fact with ontological status, and it doesn't come from God. It's something that God knows. Does God know that 2 + 2 = 4? Well, then it's a fact with ontological status. And I'm out of time, but that's pretty much all I had anyways. Want to learn how to make people do this?
I'm angry because you're a little fucking weasel, and I want to fucking slap you. That's why I'm angry. I'm going to get a little bit triggered when you fucking treat me like I'm an idiot when I know way more than you do.
This book will be your guide. I debunk all of the common anti-scientific arguments, plus some uncommon ones. Every single copy is personally signed and shipped by me. There's even an audiobook. Link in the description.
Awesome. I'd like to start, and I appreciate the charitability, Planet Peterson, and I definitely match energies. However, I want to turn it up a little bit because I think that some of the argument was being missed. Tag is not just a presupposition; it's an argument, which I believe serves as a form of evidence for the necessity for a God. In your rebuttal, you cited I, the self, knowledge, reasoning, and truth. Okay, all of those things are within the question that Tag is asking of a non-theistic position. This isn't to be uncharitable, but it is the entailment of the argument. I'm not granting you that within your worldview. Now, again, I recognize that these things are real, so I'm not saying that you as an individual in this debate are not capable of, making a logical argument, using logic, using reason. What I'm saying that if your worldview was the case, if your worldview is true, you wouldn't be able to. So when you say, well, look, we can come to the truth of things, that's begging the question that's being asked by Tag. What we're saying here is that these things that you're appealing to exist in a type of way and need a specific world in order for that to exist. That's where the debunking comes in. If you disagree, then we're looking for the justification for these things within your worldview that allows for things to be universal, immaterial, and conceptual, and yet in a world that had and invariant, especially laws of logic that behave within the regularity of nature in a law-like way, but yet the atheist empiricist worldview posits that everything came from flux, everything came from randomness, accidentalism, determinism, whatever flavor, teleological, right? So how can that kind of world give you things with this type of ontological status unless you disagree with any of those criteria of the ontological status, which we can get into.
Yes. So I'm going to address two things there. I'll try to do a back and forth here. So I kind of find this claim that if my world, so like you fully admit, well, yeah, an atheist can do logic, they can do like math or science, they can know things or whatever. Like you admit, it would be really ridiculous to say otherwise. But then you say, if your worldview were true, you couldn't do these things. Right. Now, what I'm confused by this is, let me draw a comparison here. I'm reading this book about the development of science in the West, going all the way back to about 500 BC, and I'm currently doing research on the mathematics from that time, because I was curious as to what kinds of math could they not do that we can do today. So they had these philosophical ideas about mathematics that made them literally incapable of doing what we can do today. They didn't have a zero. They said that decimals are not a thing, so they couldn't multiply, add, subtract decimals. They didn't believe in the existence of negative numbers. So their philosophy literally made them incapable of doing algebra and coordinate planes and reflecting over axes and things like that. But whatever my worldview is, so if what you're saying is true, that I couldn't do these things in my worldview, well, I have a secular worldview and I can do them. What I would expect is like the philosophy of those ancient mathematicians. Yes, they were literally incapable of doing math and science that we can do today because they had the different philosophy. But you and I have almost like diametrically opposed philosophies, but I can still do epistemology, just like you can. So why am I able to do it even though I assume God doesn't exist?
Because he does exist. That's what the whole argument is. So it's very similar to.
But then why would you claim if my worldview were true, I couldn't do it?
Because if your worldview were true, and again, I know you take a kind of almost agnostic atheist thing where you're not making a declaration there is no God. I'm focusing in on the claim that it's possible that the universe has no God. Okay. So that is in itself a type of positive claim. It's a type of presupposition that comes with a slew of metaphysical baggage, right? So you're saying that there could be a world where there is no immaterial universal mind to ground immaterial universal concepts. And I'm saying in a form of retorsion, just like you can't deny logic because you'd be using logic to do so, to deny an immaterial universal mind while appealing to an immaterial universal concept is a type of performative contradiction.
But that's only because you start with the claim that it's not possible unless God's mind exists and instantiates and substantiates.
No,
and is the ground.
I'm making a demonstration, though. Again, this is why I wanted to ask you: do you agree with the ontological status of these things as I've presented them? Immaterial, invariant, universal, and conceptual.
So are you asking me if logic is a transcendental thing
truth,
that exists?
Any of these categories I've listed, we could do logic, truth, meaning. Any of these things would do.
No.
I think they all share. So you don't believe they have that ontological status?
No. And the most common example I give is temperature. So if you have a container of gas, it has a temperature. But you cannot have temperature without that medium. It's substrate dependent. If you remove you can't remove all of the temperature from it and have it exist somewhere else. You can't remove all of the particles and leave the temperature sitting there in the container or whatever. So no, I do not view that logic is something that exists somewhere that we borrow and we start doing it. I think it is merely. I think formal logic is entirely grammatical, essentially.
Okay,
and logic in general is just a description of human reasoning.
Okay, so your grounding is in grammar.
No,
Okay, you said it's entirely grammatical. So is logic is it identical to grammar?
When people like perform or are doing formal logic, it is merely a grammatical exercise.
Right. But this isn't talking about the doing of logic. This is talking about the possibility of logic, specifically the laws of logic. I'm really narrowing down the 3 classical laws, especially like my example with the law of identity. They're descriptive. Like you would posit that this is descriptive. Well, descriptive of what? Would you agree that it's descriptive? Okay, well, again, that's a metaphysical claim. I have no clue what you mean by that. Do you mean a group of particulars?
So is TAG.
Well, no, because I can give a demonstration that has explanatory power and coherence. I don't believe that you can. And this is why I'm asking, when you say the universe, that's a broad metaphysical claim. Are you talking about just a group of unrelated physical particulars? Is that what that means?
But I just mean like the universe, like essentially nature. But TAG
that's
is
another metaphysical claim.
Yeah, so is TAG.
No, TAG is an argument. You just said nature. I'm asking, what is nature? A group of unrelated material particulars? That's a yes or no question.
It's an argument that, but it doesn't do. It's just metaphysics. That's what the argument is centered.
I know. I'm asking for your metaphysics
about what grounds the ability to. What is the universe? The set of all things that exist? Or you could just say it's synonymous with nature?
I'm asking you, is that a set of unrelated material particulars? It's just a question.
Well, the universe would be singular.
So it's just one thing? So there's not God's many things in the universe?
Well, yeah, but that would just be the like set theory. I am one being, but I have 2 hands.
Right. So I'm asking what you're referring to. So again, now you're making this claim about You're making an umbrella term, but that thing, the universe, that's not verified empirically.
You don't think that the universe exists is an empirically demonstratable claim?
No, but this is what I meant by the starting points. Is you're saying we come to knowledge through empiricism, and that's how we can know things, like how I know the universe. But the universe isn't encompassed in the purview of empirics. This is Hume's guillotine.
I'm not really sure. Say that again. I'm not sure what you mean by that.
Okay, so you're like, do you have not like, okay, whenever I say the universe and you're making this claim that there is this thing called a universe, you're referencing reality, right? And the world that you are empirically verified, which is sense data, right? Would you agree with the term all knowledge comes from sense data?
Ultimately, I feel like that's probably true. Because I would even argue that when we exercise, when we do mental activities, like I make up categories. Like I don't think integers are real objects. I'm not a mathematical Platonist. But when we do things like invent kinds of arithmetic or whatever and say 2 + 2 = 4, that's my brain doing that work. So it's still empirical.
Okay, but what I'm saying is that you cited this thing called the universe, and you are saying that you have knowledge of the universe, but all you have is your sense data. Your sense data does not give you knowledge of this thing called a universe. It gives you knowledge of objects and sensations in front of you. So I'm saying, how do you make the leap from all knowledge comes through sense data to there's this thing called a universe?
Because the only thing I can sense is the universe. 100% of all of the data that I've ever collected in my life, or I would argue that anybody's ever collected,
sorry, I don't mean to interrupt.
Is in the universe.
Okay, well, this is back to my question of when you say the universe, are you talking about? I have a few questions to do an internal critique. Are you talking about just a group of physical particulars?
Essentially,
is there anything immaterial to the universe?
It's all physical. Energy is still physical, even though it's not made of stuff.
No, I understand. That's like the physicalist. I get it. So, so it's a group of physical particulars and physical things happening. Now you have this. Would you agree now you disagreed with my my criteria for the ontological status of these categories that I mentioned. But when it comes to the law of identity, for example, you said it's purely grammatical. But so this is where the problem lies, is that it's a description of something and of something in the universe, right? I know you don't think it's ontologically out there, but there's a behavior that objects are themselves and not themselves.
That's what it's grounded in.
But no, so you're saying it's grounded in this group of unrelated particulars. How do unrelated particulars give you an invariant universal law?
Because claims without reference are completely incoherent.
Okay, again, this is retorsion, I understand, but how does the metaphysic of your worldview allow for invariant universal laws if all the universe is, by your own definition, is a bunch of unrelated physical particulars?
Because those particulars are structured and behave in a certain way.
Structured?
Yeah.
Okay, so like they're structured and they behave in a certain way. So you now cited structure and behavior. So if I have a bunch of like, let's say for example, we scale this down. I have a bunch of pebbles in a bucket, and let's say that I'm like doing an analogy, like I'm God and this is the universe. Now I'm not presupposing God in the internal critique, but like this bucket with all of these physical particular rocks, that's the universe, okay? And they've fallen into this bucket in random accidentalism. But now you're saying there's a structure and behavior that all these particulars make that has now immaterial, universal, and conceptual laws that can be recognized by the human brain. I don't
think any of those laws are immaterial. They're literally grounded. They're substrate dependent. They're grounded in a physical, real nature.
Okay.
Nature abides by nature's rules, essentially.
Well, how do you get rules from a dysteleological universe would be the first question. And two, you actually, like, what particular, this is the problem of the one and the many, what particular thing is the source of the rules by which all unrelated particulars now abide by, you see? Like if I say my brain is the grounding source for the universal laws of logic, the implication of that would be if I died, then there would be no more universal laws of logic. So when you say it's grounded in a physical thing, it's like which rock on the earth is grounding the universal laws of logic? Or you're saying it's all of them at once?
It is the universe. So
but all that is unrelated physical things. So how does a bunch of unrelated physical things now make a universal law that they all equally abide by?
While they are related, hold on, let me write down a term here.
No, relation. And now you're going to relation. Where do they get relation?
Well, that's not the point. While they aren't related, you said like
they're unrelated.
They're
and now
all
you're saying
they're all subject to the same natural forces or whatever. So
that's what's in question. What natural forces? Where does empirical, secular, deterministic, physicalist, naturalist come up with this idea of natural forces?
Well, we observe them. They're incredibly obvious. So I want to go back because we're kind of changing the subject here. So you said, how do they emerge in a dysteleological universe? Mm-hmm. Well,
because you claim structure and behavior.
Yeah. So like take a circle. Where does pi come from in a circle? It comes from the ratio of its circumference to its diameter. Pi doesn't exist somewhere else and allows circles to exist. Just literally the structure of a circle basically produces pi, that constant. And the universe existing, nature existing, or whatever, the structure and behavior of things in the universe operate according to certain fixed principles. We can call them nature's laws. We can call them the laws of physics or whatever. They merely emerge. It's not all that satisfactory of an answer, but it has analogs that don't require anything deeper.
Again, so it does if you're going to give a justification for how your metaphysic can produce such a thing. You citing geometry, math is derivative of logic. That's what's in question here. This is what I think people miss with TAG is this is extremely fundamental stuff. This isn't like, again, I grant that geometry exists. You grant that geometry exists. But all of these are based off of principles observed in the world that don't match up with a bunch of unrelated particular physical things that are deterministic, accidental. They don't have a mind. They don't have any teleology. They're just doing what they do, and it's all changing, by the way. But then
if it was grounded in a mind, then it could change at any moment, and a consistent universe where we can know anything completely blows up. Now you can presuppose that won't happen, but you can't prove it in any sense.
Well, no,
at all.
but in very like if a mind it had an idea for a world to be invariant and then created that world and instantiated that idea with the material, it would make sense and have coherent justificatory power why there's invariant laws, why the material is structured around invariant laws. To say that there is no mind and there's just teleology, it's a complete contradiction to say, well, everything's random, everything's in flux, but we also have invariant structure. So there's nothing random to nature.
No. I assume that you think that
I don't want to get an evolution debate like Jim Bob, but isn't like random mutation the whole crux of evolution?
You
just said there's nothing random in nature. That denies evolution.
You gotta let me talk. I think you think that dysteleological and random are the same thing. They're not at all the same thing. But just going back to the mind real quick, if the mind had free will, it could change everything at any moment. Nature can't violate nature's own laws. The universe can't change its own laws of physics. So actually, consistency in nature is the only thing that you could possibly expect in an atheistic universe. Now, I'm not saying that proves God doesn't exist, because God could produce a universe or whatever that abides by consistent rules, but God could also change them whenever God wanted to. So I don't expect it more on theism versus atheism at all.
Okay, but I mean, you just citing that nature has rules that it plays by the way, this is almost like a reification of personification. You can't draw circles
that don't have pi as the ratio.
I know.
It can't be done.
I understand that. I agree that there's rules to nature. What I'm saying is that if these things like rules, just that word, like granting you, like that's the thing that you're not understanding is from an atheist position to say, so like, who makes rules? What is the colloquial term for a rule? It's something that a human, makes and structures something around so that things stay in order, right? But now we have a world that has we have no mind in order to do that in the only colloquial sense the way we know the word rules. But now you're appealing to these rules that no science can actually give you an explanation for why they are the case. They have to assume they're the case first to even do science. That's what we mean by the arbitrary starting point.
Your starting point is arbitrary.
No, it has explanatory coherence and
but it explains
powers.
Nothing.
It absolutely does. I can give you the explanation. Do you want to hear the explanation?
What does it explain? Because remember, there's no epistemology that I can't do that you can do.
I know, but you can't justify it.
Well, then,
and that's important.
Okay, but a justification is not explanatory. It's just the presuppositional
what do you think
baggage
the definition of justification is in philosophy? It's literally giving an explanation for the good reasons you have to believe in something. Justification is quite literally an explanation.
But this is just a brute claim that doesn't actually do anything.
No,
it does no work.
Demonstrating the entailments of my worldview versus your worldview. We compare them. Which one has coherence? Which one has epistemic justification? We can go into that. And again, I can give the explanation. Okay. We have one foundational epistemic presupposition. And again, I don't agree with the principle of parsimony, but I've talked to a lot of atheists who do. And if you're going that direction, having a bunch of presuppositions versus one foundational one, I would say is more parsimonious. But again, I don't take that position. But we have...
Yeah, I wouldn't. Because God's not parsimonious. God's the most complex imaginable thing. It's not parsimonious.
Well, no, I mean, if we're talking about, somebody who has to grant themselves, 4, 5, 6 to a dozen presuppositions versus one, that would apply to Occam's razor. But anyway, we have a grounding source in the nature of God as the highest point of logic, the highest point of truth in his nature. He can't violate his nature because that is his ontology as God. Now, God has a mind because he's personable. That's where teleology comes from. God wants to create a world. He has an idea for the world. His ideas are informed by his nature in the same way that if I'm building a house, my ideas are informed by my human nature. Okay. So he has an idea for the world. He creates it out of material, creates material, and structures the material around the ideas, which explains why we have these rules that you cited to, but have no explanation for. It explains why we have access to the universal immaterial concepts that structure the world so that we can have a dominion over it and make sense of it. It explains why animals don't, because humans are made in God's image and animals are not. And it explains how we can have meaningful sentences at all, because meaning is another thing that is not empirically verified. It's assumed. So this gives an actual...
These are just claims. These aren't anything other than claims.
Okay, but do you understand how this... Okay, even if it's just a claim, it makes sense. It's coherent. It's forward. It follows. It has justificatory power. When I ask you the same questions, it's, well, natural laws, and we got the natural laws, and what's going on? You're not telling me anything. I can give you the actual.
We know nature exists.
The things
I'm living in it. So are you.
Here's the thing. I don't actually grant that without so I grant that you know that nature exists. I'm not granting that you would know nature exists if the preconditions that I just described weren't the case. And you have not given me a reason why, in your worldview, these things can exist without meeting the preconditions. You denied the ontological status criteria that I gave you. And if we got into that, that would destroy the possibility of truth, logic, or knowledge at all. If truth isn't universal, then it's subjective, so there's no truth.
God's a subject. God's a subject. Yeah, but God has a mind with free will.
Okay.
God can change the laws of logic tomorrow. If he can't, then he's constrained by them. I'll just platonically adopt a view of the ontological status of, like, I am not the atheistic worldview. There are atheists that would disagree.
You have an atheistic worldview.
I know atheists that are Platonists. I know atheists that are that have.
No, but I came to debate your position, though, Peterson.
Yeah, and that's totally fine. But all I'm doing is telling you that they can, like, secularly, atheistically, or whatever, you can claim through Platonism or whatever that there is ontological status to these things.
Okay, how would you justify that?
Well, I'm not. Well, they would merely assert that there is a necessity.
So again, a mere assertion is just an assertion, and there's no justification there.
Yes, your claim is no better than a Neoplatonist
claim.
No,
mine has justificatory power, coherence, and
no, there are no justifications.
I've given them to you. Okay, so if I say that truth exists, I can justify this because truth is universal, immaterial, invariant, and conceptual. The only way for that to be possible is if there's an immaterial, universal, invariant mind. Okay?
Why is that the case? Why should anybody think that that's the case?
It follows. Okay, you can't ground the immaterial in the material. You can't ground the universal in a particular.
Logic,
in a concept.
Ground logic in the realm of forms.
But no, let me. You wanted the justification. I want to say it one more time for the sake of the audience. If the ontological status is all these things together, if it's immaterial, it has to be grounded in the immaterial. If it's universal, it cannot be grounded in a particular. And if it's conceptual, it has to be grounded in a mind. This follows. Whether or not you agree with it, it follows. And that's what I mean by justification. It's good reasons for my belief. That's what justification is.
Yeah, but even if it's valid, that doesn't make it true, because I could just say that the God defeating.
I'm saying is from your position, truth isn't possible. So why should we take the position that can actually can't even demonstrate how they come to truth in a coherent and justified way? Who denies the ontological statuses that make truth possible?
You haven't demonstrated that I can't do that. You've just said the only way to do it is through the mind of God, and you don't believe in the mind of God. Therefore, you can't do it. You don't get to claim I'm right because you're wrong, and you can't be right because I'm right. Like, you can't do that.
I have demonstrated in this debate how your worldview makes these categories impossible. If truth has any universality to it, It has to be grounded in something universal. You said the universe is a bunch of unrelated particulars. Unrelated particulars don't ground things that are all encompassing.
I don't.
There's a demonstration.
I said it was grounded in the universe, not in the things that make up the universe. God has particulars
in your position other than what makes up the universe. What is the universe? I asked you,
the
is
set
the
of
universe
all things that exist? It's synonymous with reality, synonymous with nature.
Wait. You just said, I said it's grounded in the universe, not the things that make up the universe. What is the universe? The things that make up the universe.
I said the set of all things that exist. It's singular.
Oh, the set. So what is a set material?
The set is singular. God has...
Does God have material?
Does God have attributes?
I would say that he has an essence. We believe in essence energy distinction from my worldview. So
like, is God loving? Is God loving?
Sure.
Is he wise?
Well, that would be malformed. He is the grounding of all knowledge. So wise would be something within a created order. But yeah, I guess colloquially,
he's the most,
say, sure, he's the most
wise,
yeah.
whatever. Okay.
Sure.
Is he three persons?
Three persons, one in essence and nature.
Okay, so you've grounded this in a series of unrelated, apparently, things.
No, they are the embodiment of relation. Again, that's how I can justify relation. The things in the
universe are that.
No, remember. Let's go back to the unrelated.
If God can have attributes,
relation, I just grounded relation. You can't.
Yes, the universe. The universe, singular.
It sucks to get debunked.
Well, hold up, let him get it off.
The universe, singular, composed, has characteristics, is composed of.
This is the problem with one of the many. How does your system?
Hold up, Eli. Let him get it off. Let him get it off.
Oh, forgive me.
There's nothing happening on this side that is not happening on that side. The universe, singular, but compositionally is composed of different things. God, singular, is composed of different things. But they are a universal thing. God, the universe or nature, whatever.
The Trinity solves the problem of the one and the many by their relation in their divinity. You can laugh. I'm giving you the explanation. The relation in their divinity, distinct in personhood, united in divinity. That's an explanation. When I ask you, how do you get this thing called three persons united in divinity? I know you disagree with it, but again, now we come to your worldview and you say bunch of unrelated
grounded in one thing, the universe.
No, yeah. Now there's this thing called
one
relation,
essence, the universe.
How does the particular things have this thing called relation? How does that happen? What's your justification for relation between unrelated particulars?
They exist in the universe. They interact together.
No, the universe is these things. So now there has to be something
God
more
is
than just these things.
Those things that you believe in. Justify how they interact together.
Well, they exist in perfect spiration, because if God is all Lord, then he has to be all Lord over something. If he's all loving, he has to be all Lord over something.
These aren't justifications. These are just claims. These are just claims.
What justification is an argument and an explanation, which I'm asking from you, and we're not getting, unfortunately. And this is why I say TAG debunks atheism, and I'm demonstrating that. Now, again, going back to the unrelated particulars, if you're saying that there are a bunch of the universe is identical to a bunch of unrelated things, but now they have relation in a set, you're appealing higher than just the material world now. And I'm asking for the justification for that.
I haven't done that.
Whenever you say they exist together in a set, that's appealing to higher than just the physical things, which is what you literally said the universe was.
Universe, noun, singular.
Okay, nouns? How does a bunch of unrelated material give you a noun?
By existing? Like, what is
this? So
how does something that exists exist?
Now you're presupposing existence. You're just
presupposing existence. Why am I not allowed to do that?
Because it's arbitrary, and in a debate,
presupposing God is arbitrary.
Not if I can give a coherent, justified explanation. Then it's no longer arbitrary. It's contingent.
Anybody can construct a valid argument that doesn't make it true. I could say the God-defeating penguin is a necessary being, therefore God doesn't exist.
This is what the whole okay, that is exactly what's in question, is how do we come to truth? So you're saying making
I could just make shit up. I could say zip zop.
Right. But what I'm saying is everybody is in the same problem of needing to find a way to justify truth claims. That's the paradigmatic part of a paradigm level argument. We all have to figure out how to do that. Well, I believe truth is a person. So I think truth is God. I know you've heard that before.
Then the answer to all questions can validly be stated as God.
It follows, man.
God.
It follows.
Well, if you think that is valid epistemology, then I don't know what to tell you.
Well, I mean, again, like this is what I mean whenever we say impossibility of the contrary, is that if a system could give an equally justified, coherent rebuttal, then this prompt wouldn't be the case. But what I'm demonstrating is all you have is, well, these are the axiomatic things I have to grant myself in order to come to truth propositions at all. And then when we actually look at these things and we say, wait a minute, the metaphysic of the world that you've proposed doesn't account for the way that these things actually exist in the world. And so if that's
how does yours
can be demonstrated
other than by claiming God makes them exist?
Okay, again, this is where it comes to the retorsion. I want to go back to retorsion really quick, because again, you would agree that to deny logic would be using logic to do so. To deny truth would be a truth statement. So it's a that's retorsion. It's like it self-validates the criticism. So that's the type of argument, if that's valid, and you would agree that that's valid to say, that that's a great way. It's a simple Aristotelian way to show somebody who denies the existence of logic that logic exists. I'm doing the same thing, but I'm showing and demonstrating that the retorsion actually comes by the use of the thing you're talking about. So when you're using an immaterial, universal, invariant concept, to deny that, you would be appealing to a universal immaterial mind, you see. Because again, I described the grounding of those things. If it's conceptual, it has to be grounded in a mind. If it's universal, it has to be grounded in something universal. If it's immaterial, it can't be grounded in something material. So again, just like denying truth is a truth claim, so that's self-validating. If in fact the ontological status of these things I'm talking about is the case the way I'm talking about it, to deny it would be denying the only possible way it can be grounded.
But now, I reject your entire premise that these things are eternal and immaterial.
No, I
reject the entire premise.
I said universal. Okay, so you deny that logic is universal.
I didn't say universal. I said eternal and immaterial.
I didn't say eternal. I said universal. You got to...
I know. I didn't say that. And then it was like you were acting like I did say that.
No, I said that they're universal, and you're like, I'm not saying they're eternal. Nobody said eternal.
So by universal, it applies to everything?
Yes, it's everywhere, everywhere present at all times.
Well, it can't address the statement, this statement is false. So it can't do that.
So again,
it collapses
this would imply
logic.
How does that? So how does me saying that logic is universal
because
collapse
it breaks
logic?
Non-contradiction?
What are you talking about? Not the law of non-contradiction.
This is like a really famous. This is a really famous.
No, I understand.
There's three laws of logic.
Presupposing, you're presupposing logic in this question.
That's not what I'm doing. I'm just simply giving you an example of if it's universal, then why does it? If it's universal, then how come sometimes it fails?
Well, again, because for something to fail necessitates, for something to be false necessitates that there's a truth. And if that's absolutely the case,
I didn't say that it's false. I said that it can't do something.
Well, okay, just because it had so logic can't be illogical. We're back to retorsion again. Like I agree with that, but how does that deny its universality?
Because it can't deal with the claim this sentence is false.
Yeah, we would just say it's illogical.
The
That's
statement
using
is
logic
illogical
and presupposing logic. This statement is false. Yeah, it's a paradox, right? It's a paradox with this,
Yeah, it's a
which
logical
is within
paradox. It collapses
logical.
the law of
Right?
non-contradiction.
Wait. What kind of paradox?
A logical paradox?
Right. So we're presupposing logic again. That's what I'm saying. How does that? If okay, I get. Let me steel man what you're saying. So you're saying that if we have
I'm
paradoxes,
not saying that logic. I don't think it exists in the way you think it exists. I think it is a tool that we
you
use.
don't think it's but you don't think it's universal.
I'm just using. Yes, if universal means, to me that seems to mean that it can't fail, and I'm just giving an example where it seems to fail.
No, that's not. That's like the failure of logic. Okay, I'm sorry. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but the failure of logic, in my view, would be something to be illogical or paradoxical, right? But when I'm talking about universal, is I mean you can't go find a place where the laws of logic no longer apply. It's a necessary part of
because logical claims
existence.
Yeah, because logical claims require reference in order for them to make sense.
Right, exactly. That's universality.
Then it doesn't come from God.
Okay, that's just a claim, but you've now.
Sure, I can prove it to you right now. I can prove it to you right now.
That it's not universal, but I want to point out for the audience.
I can prove it to you right now.
You just agreed that there's no place where you don't need to have a reference, which supposes a law of identity, which demonstrates the universality
that's the ontological grounding.
No, but you just demonstrated the universality of the law of identity. But go ahead. What's your next question?
That's not a problem for me.
You said it wasn't universal. Now you've demonstrated how it is. So that is a problem. You're all over the place.
I was really just asking a question because I thought it was interesting to dive into the the collapse of the law of non-contradiction. But anyways,
it's a great thought experiment. But again, I'm trying to focus on you're here to defend that atheism is not debunked. So anyway, but what's your question?
Oh shoot. What color is your car? It's going to sound weird, but I'm going somewhere with it.
White.
Okay. You have a white car. That is a logically true statement.
Yes.
So, can that statement ever be false?
Could it ever be I guess if I painted my car a new color, right?
Well, yeah, but like we're not talking about like it being conditional upon whatever. Like it currently maybe we'll have to pick a different example. 2 + 2 = 4.
Yeah.
Okay, can that ever be false?
No.
Why?
Because it is it's a mathematical truth based on universal invariant laws.
Why didn't you say it's based in God?
Well, because you are aware that's my. I could have just
because you made a platonic argument there, which is kind of weird.
How is that a platonic argument? What are you talking about?
Because like I could be a mathematical Platonist and say that that's the reason that arithmetic or mathematical logic or whatever works.
Yeah, I would just ask you, how do you get universal invariant laws? Which is the question I've been asking you all night.
Well, I'm trying to demonstrate something to you here. So
I know.
So pretend the universe doesn't exist, but God's eternal mind exists, right?
That was true at one time.
Okay. So could God therefore have said 2 + 2 = 5?
No, because that's a reference from the I mean,
then it's not grounded in God.
It's a
God
reference
has to follow
to the
the
created order. Hold on,
rules.
you're not letting me finish this. I can answer it. Okay. This is why my paradigm has explanatory power. Within my paradigm, there's a created order and there's the uncreated. Okay. 2 + 2 = 4 is conditional on the universal invariant laws of reality. And I have an explanation for why reality is created that way. But God saying, before he created the universe, 2 + 2 = 5, there's principles in there that are picked out, and that supposes that he created the universe already, right? So he could have made it that way if he decided to make creation that way, and then it would be true. But you're saying, what if God referred to the universe that he hasn't created yet? That doesn't make any sense.
So like you think that mathematical, like you think integers really exist?
So this is where you'll know something more than me. I don't know what integer means. Could you tell me?
Well, it's just like a number.
Oh, okay. Is that it's synonymous with number?
Yeah, I think they have to be whole numbers. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Well, yeah. Again, I think that these are universal, like properties of nature that have a real ontology. Again, within the regularity and structure of the created order. But again, I think that they refer to a principle, right? Like when we go back to the law of identity, if I pick out one, like, we could go to tech, like middle school math. Johnny has one apple. It doesn't have to be an apple. It's just a placeholder for a that refers to one principle, and that principle could be anything. That's why math is applicable to things. But again, this is within the created order. I don't think that God is like made of math the way we know math. I think that his nature is truth, and if math is truthful, I have a grounding source for that.
Okay, so just real quick because I forgot the answer. Could God make the utterance before he creates the universe? Could God hold the belief or whatever 2 + 2 = 5? Could he do that?
Well, so two things, and I'm not trying to dodge. I just want to clarify something. Just like my position justifies the reality that I'm in and gives a coherent account for truth. But that doesn't mean that I now have exhaustive knowledge of the way God's mind works. That would be a non sequitur. I'm not saying that that's what you're saying per se, but I want to clarify with that. I would say that like the way we have beliefs and the way that God has beliefs is not a one-to-one. And again, a mathematical proposition is something coming from the created order. So like him having knowledge of how he plans to create the created order, yeah, he could have that thought, but he creates the created order unto his will. But its truth value comes from how it exists in creation. So there's not like the earth and the universe wasn't eternally with God forever. There was a moment where he created it.
It pretty much sounds like you're
this distinction.
It pretty much sounds like you're saying God could say 2 + 2 = 5, because God could create a universe where that actually is the truth of the value
right, and
of
then
2
it would be
+ 2.
true.
Okay, yeah. Well then 2 + 2 = 4 is not eternally true.
I never said it was eternally true. I said it was
you
universally
said logic
true,
is eternal. You said logic is eternal.
Dude, I have said all night long, universal, immaterial, conceptual, and invariant. Eternality applies to God, and his nature is ultimately logical. So anything he creates will be informed by that nature. But the way you understand math is
eternal. Eternal logic is just textbook tag. So I'm really confused here.
Well, then you clearly have not understood. Like his nature is eternal. And his nature is all logical, okay? But now when we're getting into a mathematical proposition, that's a proposition that's based on the reality of the created order that has its structure grounded in God, okay? So that's what I'm saying is that you're saying, well, like you're trying to apply something from the universe that God created to him before he created it, and I'm saying that doesn't make sense. The world he's going to create is going to be logical because it's informed by his nature. Okay,
then it could take any form, and so that seems to
anything can be logical. No, that implies that anything can
if
be
God
logical.
can create any kind of reality, then yes.
No, he can only create a logical reality.
Yeah, but the logical reality he creates can take on any form.
It's not arbitrary. It
obviously is arbitrary. God's decision to do it one way versus another is just very clearly arbitrary.
No, again, he can only do it according to his nature. That is like opposite of arbitrary. It's not flippant. It's not based on a whim.
He doesn't have free will.
Definition of arbitrary. Yes, we have free will, but we're confined to our nature. I have free will to do whatever my human nature permits me. God has free will to do whatever his divine, ultimate truth, ultimate good, ultimate logical nature permits him. So yeah, it's free will, but he can't be evil, for example.
That still produces an infinite creativity space of the way things could be. I want to use a different example, and then I'll let you grill me because I've been asking you questions for probably about 15 minutes.
Either way, brother.
The mathematical example may just be like not a great example because of how abstract mathematics is, right? So let's just take like the planet Earth. The planet Earth is not the planet Mars. So that's a logical like law of identity kind of statement, right?
Correct.
Okay. Before God created the universe, if you ask me, God is absolutely permitted to say Earth is Mars, because there is no Earth, there is no Mars. There's no referent. So just like I can say I can create a fiction in my brain, and I'm perfectly allowed to do that. You can do it too. All zigzags are doopity-doos. So those two things are just the same thing. They mean the same thing. There is no Earth, there is no Mars before creation. So God can just simply make claims that actually do, in reality, violate the law of identity.
Again, the law of identity is based on regularity in the nature already created.
But that's what I believe, except for the created part.
Let me respond.
So this is
you made my argument for me. No, you made my argument for me. You said it has to be based on a reference. That's the exact
opposite of how I see it.
No, I know it is, but I'm sorry that that's the case. But look, you said it has to be based off a referent. That would be literally my exact same answer. It would be illogical and nonsensical for God to be making claims about a referent he hasn't made yet. So I don't understand the point of your question or what it does as a defeater for TAG at all.
If you're going to say that God gets his ontological grounding for claims in creation, then they don't come from him. They come from his creation.
God is the ultimate epistemic foundation. He doesn't have.
But without the universe, foundation. God can't even make logical claims.
Okay, again, I agree. Here's the thing, God, we don't know if he's like claiming stuff before he creates the universe. If he's like, because again, claims and speaking sound proverbiating out of the mouth, making finite propositions as particular finite things. That's our understanding of making a claim. Now you're trying to take that paradigm and again, like apply it to the ultimate epistemic foundation for the possibility of those things and act like it's a one-to-one and ask questions about it. And as I conceded, I don't have exhaustive knowledge about the way God thought in eternity pre-creation. I don't have exhaustive knowledge about whether or not he was making claims between the persons of the Trinity that were like not nonsensical and non-referential to the reality. What I'm saying is our ability to even understand the things you're talking about at all are based on a created order that is justified in our universe by all the arguments that I've made tonight, and trying to impose. And the thing is, I know your chat doesn't like this. I've read the comments, but it is a category error because you're taking something from the created order and then like putting it onto God and asking how he would, relate to something within the created order when he's in the uncreated category. So it doesn't work in that way. You're citing things that the ultimate epistemic foundation created and asking how that applies to him. Well, if he created it, then he's the governor of it. He's not restrained by it.
Sure. I want to ask you some questions. They're kind of about the debate, but they're a little bit different.
Okay. We're almost at 10 minutes. I do want to get one more cross-examination. If you got a couple, I'll take them.
I'll do mine last.
Okay. This is just one interesting thing because I did watch some of your content. I've seen you use the Descartes' demon argument and say, well, God could be tricking you. I'm sure I would give the same response that other opponents of yours had given, which is, okay, even if I granted that, it still points to a ultimate truth. If I can be deceived, that implies that there is an ultimate truth. So that doesn't do anything for my worldview. We do believe that demonic possession is real, things like that. From your worldview, everything is...
No, I was saying God could be the one doing it.
Oh, okay. Well, that would not work in our system if you were doing a true internal critique. But again, I think a sufficient answer is that
because it would violate God's nature to deceive you, or...
Correct. That's demonic. Well, that's what Satan does.
I mean, he does that. He sends a lying spirit to people. He says he gave people statutes that weren't good, that they couldn't follow.
I understand. Again, if you're going to do an internal critique, you have to do it you have to put on the whole paradigm and not bring in your own assessments of it. However, what I'm getting at is I know. Well, I'm an Orthodox Christian. I'm not sola scriptura. I go to an actual normative authority. Totally different debate, which I'm happy to have with you. Set it up with easy.
That's actually what I was going to ask you about. Go ahead.
Okay, well, let's get to it. I just want to finish this off. The appropriate response is if you can be deceived, That implies that there is, in fact, an ultimate truth of the matter if deception or lies is possible, which aids our paradigm. Now, if I turn this on you, though, as somebody who's you would agree that you get your truth claims from empiricism, right? You would call yourself
I have
an
to
empiricist.
presuppose that my senses are giving me consistent, reliable results. Just like you have to do that for God. So I wasn't making the argument. That argument doesn't.
I didn't even finish the question. It was a yes or no. You're an empiricist, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so how does like the secular version of that, brain in a vat, not actually completely destroy your epistemic foundation? Because if everything you know comes from sense data, and you could be a schizophrenic, you could be a brain in a vat, you could have all kinds of things that could actually distort. You're just taking the world as it seems to be, like Matt Dillahunty style, like, well, it appears to be the case. That's a psychological report. And if it's even remotely possible that your psychological report could be skewed or wrong or broken in some way, then how does that not throw your whole epistemology out the window?
So there's kind of two different things to this. So I do presuppose that my senses are giving me accurate, reliable data about the world. Now you do that same thing. Now when I make the argument a demon could, you don't presuppose that.
I'm sorry. That's not my. I misspoke. I do presuppose that my senses are accurate, but the accuracy doesn't come from my senses. The accuracy comes from somewhere else. So I meant to. Sorry, I'm on a hair trigger right now.
But that makes it sound like God's doing your thinking for you, or you're observing.
No, God's making my thinking possible. My senses don't.
Well, yeah, but still, like God creates the universe and creates order in that universe and whatever. But God's not doing any of the actions that you're doing when you observe the world. So you do.
But yeah, sorry. Yeah. I jumped the gun a little bit there. I didn't even mean to move my head. I meant to think it in my head. My bad. Go ahead. Continue with your line of thought.
So that's the only thing that I'm attacking. It's like, yes, but you also have to presuppose that when it's possible that God could be doing that, or that a demon could be doing that. So it just, when people, now you haven't done this tonight because presuppositionalism and tag comes in different varieties. You haven't done the whole thing of you can't even know anything, like the Sci-10 Bruggenkate and whatever approach. You haven't done that, so I haven't gone there. And I only go there when people are doing that because I think they're not offering something that's any better. That's the one thing, or that's fundamentally any
poor representation of tag. Like, obviously I would not say, look at this guy who's incapable of thinking like you're, some kind of vegetable. I'm saying that if your worldview is the case, you've destroyed the possibility of thinking. Now you do think, so that's why I'm saying it can't be the case.
Well, it's usually they say the possibility of knowledge, but I actually don't see how.
I'm talking about the possibility of knowledge. Truth, logic, meaning, information, these things I've been citing all night are all makeup. They're all pearls on the same string of the possibility of knowledge.
Well, yeah. So then, I would just throw it back. Satan could be deceiving your mind and making you see things not for what they are. Satan could have written the Bible. And believing in the Bible is what makes you go to hell. Satan can absolutely do that.
So no, for so many reasons, and I would love to have that debate with you. No, again, if you're gonna presuppose something, this is so you're. I don't know if you're trying to do an internal critique. I think you're trying, but when you do an internal critique, you can't just say things like the word of God could actually be the word of Satan, because that's not our worldview. When you do an internal critique, you're supposed to put on the entire worldview of the person and then reductio ad absurdum, reduce it to absurdity on its own grounds.
I'm not
You're saying
that
Satan could write the Bible. That's nowhere in our paradigm.
So this isn't an internal critique. I'm not saying according to Christianity might be false. I'm saying according to the proposition,
your interpretation of Christianity. So why should I care about your interpretation of Christianity?
All I'm saying is that if the devil exists, then he can deceive people, and
Correct.
he could absolutely, like, you probably think that there are false scriptures, and you just have to have faith that your scriptures are the
Well,
truth scriptures.
Again, we have a normative authority, and this is also TAG works for the whole paradigm. If again, assuming that God's real within my paradigm, Christ made a promise that the gates of hell would not prevail over the church. The church is the one that compiled the Bible. Satan is not going to infiltrate the church and manipulate the Bible in our paradigm. Now, you're making the argument that Satan exists. So in a way, you really are doing an internal critique because you're stepping out of your worldview, which doesn't presuppose a Satan, stepping into ours that does, and then making critiques about it. So you actually are doing an internal critique when you do that.
Well, we're running out of time, so we can't really get into it. But the other thing about the whole, like the solipsistic argument or whatever, I think that it's actually kind of not the gotcha that you think it is. Because let's say that
it's the logical entailment of your worldview.
I don't know what you mean by it's possible in my worldview. Is that what you mean by
no? If I do the appropriate internal critique to your worldview, reduce it reductio ad absurdum, it falls into solipsism. Again, because you don't believe that there's actually truth outside of your own mind. Everything is in your mind. I don't understand how that doesn't reduce to solipsism.
Well, unfortunately, we're running out of time. But anyways, the whole like you could be in the Matrix, therefore everything you're experiencing, whatever it like isn't real or whatever. I actually reject that. I would be having this debate. It's just that I would be having this debate in the Matrix. Like literally everything I know would still be true. But then there's this further layer or ultimate truth or ultimate reality that I'm not aware of. But that actually doesn't prove that any of the other things aren't actually true. So that's just kind of, I wanted to try to get, 2 minutes is probably perfectly fine. So my question is, if your metaphysics and epistemology or whatever allows you to do these things that you're claiming it does, then how come Christianity is just rife with contradictions? How can that be?
Rife with contradictions. Again, this isn't deconstruction zone. I'm happy to have another debate, but I'm not
talking about biblical contradictions. I'm talking about
that's a claim. We think that there can be scribal errors.
That's not what I'm talking about. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm not talking about biblical contradictions.
So again, we're not sola scriptura.
I know.
You call a contradiction. And again, this is what tags so
Buddy, I'm not talking about scripture. I'm not talking about scripture. I'm talking about being a Christian. Yes.
Let him finish what he's saying. Yeah.
Forgive me.
For example, do you think the Holy Spirit proceeds only from the Father?
Yes, I don't accept the filioque.
Then how is it that the Christian worldview, which is the only worldview that can ground truth, simultaneously leads to the conclusion that the filioque is true?
Well, what Christians believe that?
Catholics.
They're not Christian.
So I was afraid it would go there, but so somehow you're the only. Somehow your denomination is the only denomination of Christianity that actually exists.
Asking an Orthodox why the heterodox would they believe.
I thought it would go there. That's crazy.
I love you, Catholic viewers. I kind of mean it, but I don't. I do. I had to.
Your epistemology actually can account for truth because it causes people. It causes people to make claims that are logical contradictions. So you can't do it. You just have to presuppose that your denomination is the only true one.
Contradictions aren't possible if your worldview is true. 2, 1.
All right, so that is an hour of open floor. But I always like to, especially when it seems like there could be some iron sharpened a little more. I like to offer if you guys would both like another 30 minutes of open floor.
I'd rather do the questions. I gotta go get some water too.
Okay, no problem.
I gotta piss.
All right. So what that will wrap up the open floor. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're going to enter the final phase of the debate, the closing statements. Just a quick reminder for all of the live chat. Okay. The Q&A is already up there for you guys. So if you got questions for either debater, make sure you drop them in now. All right. And remember, Super Chats, PayPal, and Cash App questions, they do take priority. So if they end up filling up the whole 30 minutes, which there's literally only 2, So I don't think they will. So get your questions in, all right? And if you want to bump yourself up during the Q&A, you can just send a super chat. Or if you just want to support the show, because we're bringing you some great content, all right? And we have a lot more coming, all right? A lot more coming. We're just going to let them got one back, and then we'll let Eli get back here too as well, and then we'll move into, oh, there he is. Oh. Perfect timing. So, all right, with that being said, we're going to move into closing statements. Each debater will get 5 minutes to make their final case here. And we are going to start with Eli, so that will give Planet Peterson the last word. So, Eli, whenever you are ready for your closing statement, I will start the timer up with your voice.
All right. Well, I just want to once again give a super huge thanks to Speakeasy for making this possible. Again, for people like me who love debating, love the sport of it, love the whole culture, good, bad, and ugly. None of this would be possible for random hillbilly guys like me to come online, debate other great minds. So thank you, Planet Peterson, for also coming up as well. I just want to conclude by saying, just a reiteration of everything that we went over. We're talking about a paradigmatic worldview comparison. When we're looking at worldviews, they have to have a justified metaphysic, ethic, and epistemology. I think I demonstrated this side from the theistic perspective, and not just in a claim, but in a way that actually demonstrates how, if you're going to appeal to logic, truth, information, knowledge, and reason, to make truth claims at all, and the ontological status of these things fits the bill of universal, immaterial, invariant, and conceptual, the grounding and justification has to also match. The theistic worldview gives this justification, gives this coherency, gives this explanation. When it comes to these basic philosophical questions, it fits the bill every time, versus whenever the same type of internal critique is done to the atheistic worldview, you're left with contradictions, things that don't match up, inexplanations, assertions. Reality is reality. Existence is real. It just is. Again, nobody's refuting that you have the ability to do something, but what type of metaphysic and what type of worldview are you claiming is the case, and how are you able to do that and still appeal to the things that don't match up to the metaphysic of your worldview? So I think that was all demonstrated. I think I think atheism was debunked by TAG tonight. Let us know in the comments if you want to find me, to send me a DM, ask questions, call me an inconsiderate asshole, whatever you want to do. It's at Eli Nix Live on X, at Eli Nix Live on TikTok. I do a Q&A one at a time, debate and atheist type thing on there every once in a while. This is my hobby, so I don't call myself a content creator. I'm just a guy who does this for fun. Other than that, I concede my time. So thanks, everybody.
All right. Thank you for that closing statement. And with that, we are going to hand the mic over to Planet Peterson. And whenever you're ready for your closing statement, we will start the timer up with your voice.
Sure. I'll make it fairly short and sweet. First of all, thanks for having me. And then, Eli was a really good interlocutor. We got heated, but it never got personal or whatever. And I don't think anybody played any dumb tricks or anything. So, good, honest debate. That's pretty cool. I think sort of what happened here was, I didn't really come in here to, necessarily produce, something that is supposed to do any work, because it was, does TAG debunk atheism? If we were having a debate on does naturalism accurately describe reality or something like that, then I would have done more. I just didn't feel like that was really my job for the debate. But what we heard tonight were claims that justifications were being made, but I literally just only heard claims, presuppositions and claims. So if something's going to be debunked, then I think that is, you have to do some epistemological lifting, and just grounding brute facts and declaring necessities doesn't do that. You're just telling us what your worldview and starting point is. I thought it was deeply inconvenient, the fact that apparently God's ability to ground logical claims requires creation. So then it's not coming from God. I found that to be a little bit problematic. It would have been cool to go into that a little bit more. And then the ultimate thing, at the very end there, if you produce a worldview or a metaphysics or an epistemology or whatever that is capable of ultimately declaring that multiple contradictions are all true, then it's just completely worthless. It can't do anything. And that's kind of what happened at the end there. A Catholic would, a debate between a Catholic and Eli on TAG would be really fascinating. It would be very strange because the Catholic would be saying, well, I ground it in the ultimate truth, which is God. And then Eli would say, well, I ground it in the ultimate truth, which is God. And then the Catholic would say, I used the ultimate grounding to know that the filioque is true because it's revealed to me by God. And then Eli would say, no, that's not how that works. So this isn't contributing to epistemology in any way. I think it collapses pretty obviously. And the only option, which is a total cop-out, I think, is to just claim that somehow my denomination is the only true denomination or whatever. And it's not like that's the only example. Like some people think water baptism is required, whereas others don't, right? Some believe in faith plus works. Some believe in faith alone. Those are the only popular ones I can think of off the top of my head. So that's all I got.
All right. Well, I guess I can ask your questions until
we'll do that.
Gets back here. So you reject that God is as the necessary precondition for logic and morality. So what would you say is the ultimate foundation that makes it if you would say logical laws are universal, immaterial, and unchanging, or are they just human conventions or evolutionary byproducts?
Well, I think they're both. What we do when we're doing logic is a grammatical exercise. We're formalizing our reasoning process. Our reasoning process is us having a sort of interaction or relationship with nature. It is nature itself that operates, that is consistent, that does all these. If nature wasn't consistent, the laws of physics randomly fluctuated, if the law of identity would be broken constantly because things would turn into other things right before our eyes, then we would just see that happening. And then we would still be able to see it and articulate it and formalize it. That is all that's going on when we, when I think about logic, I'm just talking about the process of us formalizing that, us participating in it, but it's grounded in nature.
All right. And then my second question is so you would say with your worldview, reality is ultimately material or impersonal. Would that be fair to say it like that?
That reality is,
yeah, it's ultimately material. Yeah.
I think physicalism makes the most sense.
Yeah.
So it's not personal. No.
Yeah. That's what I.
Which, yeah.
Okay. So then my question would be how do abstract non-physical truth mathematics, logic, moral obligations, how does it exist, and why should we trust our minds?
Well, I think they're total inventions. The reason why it works so well is because they were invented specifically to describe nature, reality, etc. So of course they're really good at it. That's what they were designed to do. It's like I don't know, you build a race car and it's you know what? This race car, it's also really good at getting me to the grocery store and back. It's well, yeah, it's a car. It has wheels and an engine. It's supposed to do those kinds of things.
Easy, am I allowed to jump in here, or is this just you and him?
Oh, no. This is I ask 2 questions for each of you, so I was asking his questions because you had dropped off.
The
But yeah,
super chat
you get
segment.
the
Sorry.
answer to his answer too. Yeah, if you want
Okay,
to
cool.
answer
And
that.
sorry about that. I bought a damn Ethernet cable just for tonight, and I still crapped out. But at least it wasn't in the middle of the debate, so that'll work.
That's good.
But I would say that there's kind of a contradiction going on there, because you're saying it's an invention, but then you're saying it's based off of reality. So an invention, like inventing a race car, I can change it. But if truth is absolute in any way, then it's not true because the human invented it to be true. It's true because it has, at least in the correspondence theory of truth, which is what an empiricist use, it's based off of something in reality. So how can something be a completely personal invention, but then yet also have this kind of objective referent that it's based off of?
Well, what I'm saying is like the words themselves, the numbers themselves are just mental things, conventions that we invent, but they reference something else. Essentially, language and math are middlemen to the real thing that we're describing.
Precisely. But whenever, this is another reason why people misunderstand tag, is I hear this all the time on TikTok from people, is they go, it's just a language, it's just a language. Well, no, the language is the reference, and that's, that's subjective. We can create languages and create symbols that have meaning, but the meaning itself is not something that, I mean, we can like say something means something, but ultimately when we're talking about truth in the absolute form, it's based off of something that we don't invent and that we don't change. And what we're asking in tag for the justification of truth isn't the language part. It's the referent, not the reference.
All right. So then my questions for Eli. So the question I had asked you there was, if tag is necessary to ground logic, morality, uniformity in nature, these things, why are like highly trained atheist philosophers able to like understand and use them? So like basically, are they borrowing from your worldview without knowing it, or does that weaken the claim of necessity?
No, that's exactly what's happening. So again, it's about where you're choosing your starting point, right? And they're not taking into account what actually it would take to have these things, because of whatever reason, whether it's a personal distaste for religion and the idea of a god, or whatever school of thought that they come from. But they're just saying, look, this is a complicated question, like Hume's guillotine. Like we can't actually justify this without something greater than what we're saying is all we have to work with. So we're going to just call it an axiom. We're going to call it a starting point. Just grant us this, then we can explain everything. But what tag is talking about is like, what is the possibility? What would need to be the case in order for the things you're appealing to be possible? So yes, I would say it absolutely is borrowing from a theistic worldview.
Did you have anything for that, Planet Peterson?
Yeah, I just don't think that holds water, because if an atheist can reason validly and justify, or like if they can do like philosophy or whatever, or math or science without appealing to God, then God's not a necessary precondition.
Okay. Here's the thing. Let me put it in an analogy really quick. If I am somebody, this is going to be a really weird analogy, but let's say that I'm locked in some, padded room my whole life, and every day I'm fed a hamburger. And I'm saying, okay, look, dude, I have the hamburger. I'm eating the hamburger. The hamburger exists. What do I need more than that? And then I'm trying to show this person, without being able to, let's say, drag a cow into the room. I'm like, you couldn't or the lettuce, or all the different, parts that actually make a hamburger possible. I'm going, look, see, there's a piece of tendon there. And how could everything in this padded wall produce a tendon and these different things? And you're going, look, dude, I have the thing. Are you telling me I don't have a hamburger in my hand right now? Yes, you have a hamburger, but there's more than just the slot in the wall that gives you the hamburger. There's actually something on the other side of the wall that's making the hamburger possible. And just saying that I have the thing and I use the thing isn't the justification of the thing. One quick, like it again, that's going to retorsion. To deny the thing is to use the thing, but I'm making a similar retorsion argument that the nature of the thing, nature's around the ontological status of the thing requires more than, to the analogy, the padded room, the limitation that you're putting on it. Now, again, it's not a one-to-one analogy, not perfect, but that's how you could actually say, well, I have something and I use it. But if it is the case that the thing you're using requires more, and you're saying that part I don't believe in, but I believe in the thing I'm using, then you're in a contradiction.
All right. And then my next question for you, Eli, is so basically off of what you just said, then how do you distinguish between like the psychological ability to reason and the philosophical justification without like redefining knowledge, basically?
Well, again, that's the exact same argument. Like, so you can't deny that knowledge, logic, truth, meaning, information exist without using the thing. So that's the retorsion element. So that's easy. If somebody came to the debate and said, I don't believe it actually exists. If you actually watch, I'll reference a Jim Bob video. He had a recent debate with a physicalist where the prompt was, does physicalism make knowledge possible? And the guy right off the bat, first 2 minutes, is like, well, I don't believe knowledge actually exists, but I do believe physicalism makes it possible, and I believe that I have knowledge. And it's just like, wait a minute. Like, how are you using a thing that doesn't exist? Well, it's super easy to debunk that by just saying, look, you're using the thing in question. You're referring to the thing in question to say it doesn't exist. And this is actually, again, a form of providing evidence in an argument without direct material, empirical, scientific method evidence. What I hear all the time is an argument's not evidence. An argument's not evidence. This retorsion argument is a form of evidence. I'm taking that a step further and saying the thing you're using has implications by the nature of its ontological status, which makes it possible. And to have that ontological status has to be grounded in something more than you accept in your worldview. Now, again, somebody can turn around and say, well, I don't agree with those ontological statuses, like Peterson did say tonight. But then we get into the question of, wait a minute, logic's no longer universal. So wait, is it a particular? Is it not always the case that if you see something and it is itself and not itself? Okay, of course it's universal. Is it not immaterial? Okay, you can pick it up and hand it to me. I can't step in a puddle of logic. It's immaterial. It's invariant. It's not changing. Everything that we know about a truth statement is based on the invariance of these things. It doesn't change. Then the conceptual notion is, how do we access this in the mind? It requires a mind to be accessed and to be used. So now we've necessitated a mind, we've necessitated universality, we've necessitated the immaterial. What fits the bill of an immaterial universal mind? God.
All right. And did you have anything for that?
I mean, yeah, but it would take too long.
Okay, no worries. All right, so let's start up the clock here and get into the official Q&A from the chat. So chat, make sure you get your questions in the Q&A because we don't have many super chats tonight. So make sure you get your questions in there and we'll get to them. So first off, we got Call Me GL for $5 says, just a salute. Thank you very much for the support. Appreciate that big time. And then Wrath of Reason said, dropping in for an hour just to say hello. Hope everyone is doing well. And then Darth Grumpy sends in $2, says, is the Dono goal broke or are the rest of us broke? I don't know which one it is. But thank you, Darth. But then we can get over here to the chat Q&A here. So chat, if you want to bump yourselves up, just go ahead and send a super chat. So we got Belinda said, would always Belinda's questions. What would either of you do for a Klondike bar?
Aren't those like mint and chocolate? I don't like mint chocolate things.
I agree with that.
Oh shit,
premise.
we agree on
Yeah.
something.
Why would I put toothpaste on my Hershey bar? That's asinine.
Yeah, yeah. I'd pay to not eat a Klondike bar.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Bobby comes in, bumps himself up with $2, says, Mr. Planet Peterson, can a man's be a woman's?
I assume that just means man and woman, something like that. It depends on if you think that gender and biological sex are not identical things. So just to make this real quick, you have to believe something like this to be a Christian because God the Father has he, him pronouns, but he ain't got no wang. So you cannot reduce gender merely, or at least preferred pronouns merely to biology because it doesn't apply to God.
All right. Did you have anything for that, Eli?
Oh, I mean, no. No.
All right. Steelborn comes in for $5, says, Speakeasy clearly won this debate. You guys are all dumb.
Fucker.
Thank you, Steelborn.
Love you, Steelborn.
Prince of Dogs becomes a new member. Thank you very much, Prince of Dogs. And then let's get back over here. Teriak says, question for Planet Peterson. Without God, how do you account for all motion in the universe? For without motion / God, nothing is possible.
The universe is in motion, so I would probably just have to have a brute terminus that the universe exists. But this is kind of I think they're making like the Augustinian argument for, or was it Aquinas? I don't remember. Whichever one made the argument for motion, which goes back to this Aristotelian thing of, well, look, this ultimately does lead to something from nothing because you have to take, you either have an infinite regress or you have to take something that wasn't in motion producing motion. So it's a weird kind of something from nothing because it's non-motion from, motion from non-motion, which could start off as a thing, not like a literal nothing, but it's a kind of nothingness. And I mean, it's an interesting argument, but no, I could just adopt a B theory of time and just say your conventions about cause and effect and the flow of time are actually just an illusion of being a 3-dimensional creature in a 4-dimensional universe, which our most sophisticated laws of physics basically say necessarily have to be the case for anything to work at all. So,
all right. And I don't think Eli had anything for that one either. Bobby comes in, bumping himself up for $5, said, Mr. PPY.
What are you gay?
And then said, sorry, guys. All I got is tired questions. Well, thanks, Bobby. I appreciate the support anyways.
At least it's funny.
And then Prince of Dogs for $5 says, that's odd. I upgraded my membership. Been a member for a year now. Oh, it's because, on StreamYard, it'll say became a member if you upgrade your membership. So thank you for upgrading, Prince of Dogs. You're a legend. Elder Lion comes in for $5, says, appeal to retardation fallacy. Mint and chocolate go together perfectly fine. And that's not even a Klondike bar. It's ice cream dipped in chocolate.
Oh, okay.
Klondike bar is
it's like an ice cream sandwich.
Okay. Ice cream sandwiches are good as long as it's not dark chocolate, because why the hell do people eat dark chocolate? I don't get it.
Then we now back to the chat Q&A here. From RVG 3PVG3. Can an atheist agree that if anything, God is energy? Oh, can atheists agree that if anything, God is energy?
So I know that like apologists use this concept of energies. But it obviously doesn't mean what somebody who's like a materialist, physicalist, or it doesn't mean what it means in science. So I actually have no idea what energies means. This is kind of one of my problem with like God concepts. They use words like God's eternal mind or whatever. What we know about energy and what we know about minds is that they are absolutely substrate dependent. Every single thing we know of in the universe that has a mind has a brain. And by all indications, that's why they have minds. So what is God's mind? It's something completely different. And flowery language full of adjectives is used to describe it, but it doesn't actually, it's nothing but rhetoric. That's kind of one of the big problems I have.
If I could go in there, that's one thing that didn't get touched on because it didn't really go that route. But part of the paradigm of the theist is that a mind and a soul and a nous, in the Orthodox perspective, is that it's something endowed upon us by God because we're made in His image. I agree that our physical brains are what allows us to access our minds, but the question of what a mind is, and even what the self is also a part of the transcendental categories that are assumed but not justified in the atheist worldview. I would disagree that, like, I don't want to say disagree. I want to ask, like, is the mind identical to the brain in your worldview?
In sort of the sense that there's like a one-to-one correspondence, then yes. But I don't, like, obviously, like, I am seeing pictures right in front of me. So are you. That's not my brain. My brain's a physical thing. But
right,
like the one-to-one correspondence. So if that's what the mind is, the brain means, then I would say yes. I don't have like a absolute dead set solid
and
thought
again
on that.
Yeah, like in a logical system and reasoning, truth, and then even like more abstract things like love or whatever. You might be able to like scan a brain and see these little portions lighting up and making colors. Yep. But you can't actually look under a microscope and go, see that right there? That is love in an identical way. This is another example.
They can't do that with like temperature though. Or density.
Well, I know, but I mean, when we're talking about like temperature, and especially being like, I think, and you're the science guy, not me, but an absence of heat on a spectrum, I would concede that same thing with like, metric versus, like a ruler, inches versus centimeters, miles versus kilometer. Some of that is a social construct used to put a phenomena on a gradient. But when we're talking about things that are paradigmatic to our entire worldview, and saying, and I'm not saying that you've said this, I'm kind of citing like arguments I've heard people say that, like, well, our mind is identical to our brain, or the only reason that we have a mind, maybe you would agree with this, the only reason we have a mind is because of the brain. But everything that goes into a mind, especially its access to things that are immaterial and outside of a mind, can't be looked at under a microscope and seen in the brain. And then you get the emergent property argument, that it's like an engine, and an engine creates this thing called horsepower. That sounds like a decent argument at first, like, oh, the horsepower is an emergent property of the engine. But wait a minute, an engine can't self-identify, because again, now you're presupposing a self and personhood, which isn't possible in the atheist worldview, that can actually evaluate itself and say, oh yeah, me as an engine, I'm evaluating my own horsepower. Now you can have like a little screen in a person program the computer to do that, but again, now you're once again presupposing a mind. So that's where emergent property, the mind comes directly from the brain, can't be the case. The mind is a very important part of the paradigm I'm putting forward, because the way we're able to access, not ground, but access the universals in question as particulars is because we're made in God's image with a mind that is, again, not one-to-one, but similar and in like fashion to His.
All right. Next one comes in from Daddy Seahawk. Says, Peterson, were you prepared to stop being an atheist if you lost this debate? Did you give that possibility any chance?
No, I also didn't think I'd convert my opponent to atheism or anything like
It's
that.
for you guys in the audience. I hope at least maybe one person goes to liturgy after this.
Fair. Next one comes in from Reexamination Show. Says, Planet Peterson, why is justified true belief objectively more valuable than the contrary? If so, what gives value to the results of justified true beliefs?
More valuable than the contrary. So why is justified true belief more valuable than unjustified false non-belief?
I would, yeah, I think I don't want to, misrepresent, but I think the question he's asking is very similar to what you just said. It's like,
I'll put it up.
We would say that knowledge is a justified true belief, and that's how we can say we know things, right, within your worldview. But if somebody has an unjustified false belief, what is the criteria that makes, or if he says, what gives value to the results of a justified true belief? What is the evaluating metric that makes a justified true belief a justified true belief? I hope I represented that right.
So this is kind of weird to me because this seems merely like an argument or just a discussion about pragmatism. Why do we even do language? Because it's incredibly pragmatic, and the way we use language is for that purpose. Whether it's to write down scripture as God revealed it, whether it's to write a comedy show, whether it's to have a conversation about what's for dinner. That's just all it is. So the definition of something is just the agreed upon sense of what that word, like all words are just declared by fiat. The word selfie didn't exist 100 years ago. Now it does, because we are trying to make a use case for what is it? What are we going to call the thing when people do this particular thing? And we call it a selfie, right? So knowledge is, there is this thing we do in the world, even if we couldn't speak, or even if like we didn't have language or whatever. Like, I don't think anybody would disagree that dogs at least like understand things, even if all dogs don't go to heaven, right? They look at their world, they understand it, they know that's prey, that's water, that's nothing, I don't need to worry about that or whatever. So justified true belief is better because of the pragmatic sense of, like, that's just its definition, and it's the only definition that makes any pragmatic sense. So my answer would basically be, I'm searching for what's useful, and this is how we get there.
Right. If I could touch just a little bit, because this gets more into the fundamental nitty gritty, but this is a really good question. And I know you've heard these before. This is kind of like a Jim Bob style argument, right? But you're in the atheist paradigm and metaphysic, it's all inputs and outputs and determined processes, right? And you don't believe in a truth that exists outside of your own personal inputs and outputs, even though it's based on a reality. But it doesn't give you, this is why I said ethics is part of a worldview. It doesn't tell you why you ought to be logical and truthful. And then you say pragmatism and it's useful. Well, why ought we be pragmatic and useful? And then also, what is the justification criteria that you say this particular output has justification and has truth, it has usefulness? But if it can be demonstrated that truth is not a thing that could possibly exist in your worldview, what are you actually appealing to? It's like it becomes ultimately subjective at that point. At best subjective, or at worst, the collapse of the worldview is that it's not possible and it doesn't actually exist if your worldview is true. So it's a completely arbitrary thing to say this has a truth value and this has a usefulness, but truth and usefulness are these immaterial concepts that aren't actually, possible in the worldview, if that makes any sense.
Sure. I can't think of a reason to believe in the Christian God other than I don't want to go to hell, which is literally merely just pragmatic.
Well, no, like if we have a grounding for truth in the nature and will of God, then we ought to be truthful and goodness, by the way, that goodness is grounded in the nature and will of God. So if we ought to be like God because we're made in his image and he is the highest point of all these things, we now have something to point to. We have like a marker to hit. But if things are all, deterministic, flux bouncing off of each other, first of all, you can't even get to this thing called a truthful notion, right? Like it's actually non-existent if the entailments of your worldview are true. So a truth proposition out of the brain has as much truth aptness as that's just a physical chemical reaction coming from the brain, and then my fart in my butt is a physical chemical reaction coming out the opposite side. But one has truth value and the other one doesn't. But the worldview doesn't account for what's this thing called a truth value. It's just, well, because you say it is
corresponding to reality. Isn't that your definition of truth?
No, I don't hold I held a coherent model of truth that it is coherent within a system. The empiricist holds the correspondence model of truth that says it matches up with reality. What I'm saying is that's begging the question that TAG's producing, which is, wait, reality is a metaphysical statement. So you have to have a metaphysical justification for this thing called reality. You have to have a system to actually categorize this in an efficient way. So again, it's constantly like begging the question in that type of way. Like if I say truth is just a proposition, well, how do you evaluate the truth of a proposition with more propositions? And another, so what evaluates that proposition? What evaluates that proposition? There's no objectivity to truth anymore because it's all been grounded in the psychology of something. So I'm not meaning to get it. There was a great super chat. What he's saying is like, what is giving the value to say this justified true belief that comports with reality? What is the actual value that can actually be grounded and not in some type of infinite regress or contradiction?
All right. We got a gifted membership from Prince of Dogs. Thank you very much. And then another $2, just showing some support. Thank you. Another $2 and just says, shoot, I thought that's what I had going. Not sure what you meant there, Dogs, but thank you very much. I appreciate that. Re-examination show comes in for $5, says, you believe in pragmatic and useful, which point to objective value of certain outcomes over others. What gives those outcomes value?
There's absolutely no reason it has to be objective. It can be subject. I can be the one saying it's pragmatic for me. So it doesn't have to be objective at all.
But wait, isn't like induction and all those things based on some kind of pragmatic model of, well, like Hume's guillotine, we can't actually like justify and demonstrate that the regulatory of nature will hold tomorrow, but it's repeated itself enough times, and there's a pragmatic reliability to repeated observation and testing. You're appealing to this as, well, this is the best way to do it, but again, it's kind of goes into that infinite regress.
I don't see how. I don't see how.
I'm sorry. I forgot your last point. What I was trying to get to is you said it works for me. But wait, no, it works as the means to ascertain truth in your system. So if it just works for you, then now truth is completely subjective. And I could just say, well, this is what I think is true. So it's true because it's subjective to me. But this is why you're borrowing.
It specifically says certain outcomes over others.
Right. You're saying, again, you're pointing whenever you say that pragmatic and useful has an objective, or when you're ascertaining truth using pragmatic and useful methods to come to what I would think you would say is an objective truth, because I don't think you would actually say truth is subjective. That's a self-defeating point. But how can truth be objective if your standards are completely subjective?
So what I think is going on here is probably something like science or whatever is pragmatic because it does create useful systems or knowledge about the real world. So what gives those outcomes value? Because it works.
Because they're pragmatic.
Yeah,
It's
I mean,
circular. That's what we're pointing out. Is that's totally. It's like, well, what gives pragmatism its value? Because it's pragmatic. That's a vicious circle and a fallacy.
Well, it's normative. If your goal is, well, I want to be able to describe reality or know things about it. Okay, the scientific method has done more for that than anything ever has. It's not even remotely close. Math helped. Math definitely helped. So I've reached that normative goal that I had. So that is why I can say that it is pragmatic. So I'm not saying it's pragmatic because it is pragmatic. I'm saying there's a goal, and it achieved it. So therefore, it is pragmatic.
Yeah, but you're saying there's a goal, but isn't whose goal is that?
Well, lots of people share it. I mean, if you're just asking me why ought we do science,
consensus.
I don't.
Well, but now truth is based off consensus. Again, all of these implications are pointing to truth not being objective, and if truth's not objective, we no longer have truth.
So I don't see how any of this is pointing to has anything to do with truth. The scientific method just simply is good at addressing questions about the natural world.
We're not even talking about the scientific method. That has nothing to do with
truth. I can say it's true that it is good at that, but
his first question was about justified true belief. So that has to do with truth.
He sent in another two as well to say, so if pragmatic outcomes are subjective, how are they pragmatic? And then said, if you can be pragmatic without value, what is it?
You can be objectively pragmatic or subjectively pragmatic. If I want to end my hunger, then I'll just eat something. It's pragmatic to do that. That was totally subjective.
What is objective?
If I want to establish a normative goal, if I want to win the Indianapolis 500, then it actually is the case objectively that dumping nails into the engine bay will interfere with that. So objective can mean different things. Do you have an objective, or objective means true in all cases, stance independent?
Right, but when we're talking about truth, right, and how truth is not subjective, but justified true belief, going all the way back to his first question, is how you ascertain truth. But your methods for determining what's a justified true belief is based on pragmatism. Now your theory of truth, which is supposedly objective, is based off of a subjective value assessment.
So if I gave the implication that pragmatism is somehow part of my formulation for truth or knowledge, then I didn't mean to do that.
Let's go back.
But you said you said justified true belief. That's knowledge. Truth is what corresponds to reality, if you ask me.
Right. How do you ascertain what's a justified true belief?
Whether or not it corresponds with reality.
Okay, but so again, now we're back.
So
to
your
that
justifications are probably going to be normatively built in there as well.
Well, right, but even what's your methodology?
You'd have to do an investigation. Well, I would think empiricism. You'd have to at least go through a kind of empirical.
Right.
But if it's mathematical, then I could say I still think if you're using your brain, you're doing empirics. But that's more abstract. I'm not a rationalist, but I could grant that. Well, when we're doing purely abstract mathematics, we're doing a kind of rationalism. I'm fine to say that.
Sure, but empirics are based off of induction, right?
How so?
Because you have to assume the regularity of nature that can't be justified.
We both have to do that. God could change the universe tomorrow.
Well, no, we believe that God is invariant in his faithfulness, logic, the things that he makes. What we're saying is that you have faith to assume.
That. I have faith that the universe will continue operating accordingly.
Right, but you don't.
But if it changes tomorrow, then we'll just update our models. That's not even a problem.
Well, Right, but what I'm saying is that in the are you familiar with Hume's guillotine? First of
The
all,
problem of induction, yeah,
right.
yeah.
So,
But you don't know the problem of induction will continue being a problem tomorrow. So now what?
why wouldn't it be if you're just basing it off of repeated variables and repeating like something happening a bunch of times doesn't ever give you the justification. And if it changed tomorrow, you actually have to start over now. So again, you're never getting to a point
Well, all
of
the prior knowledge
objectivity.
would still be true. We would just update our models.
I know, but it's still never getting you to a point of objectivity. Now you have to wait for more repetition, and then
That's
another
not
question
objectivity.
is,
It's we can asymptotically approach the truth without ever getting to 100%. That's totally
so
fine.
now this is arbitrary. So what percentage of reliability, which again needs a value outside of itself?
I don't care. It's
what
just whether or not it's better than if process A is better than process B, then process A is better.
I know.
I don't care what actual number it is.
But
I can
better
still
is
make
a
a value
subjective
judgment.
term. Better is a subjective term.
No, if I say pee is stored in the balls and then somebody else says actually it's stored in the bladder, it's not subjective that pee is not stored in the balls. It's not stored in the balls.
Well, right, but you're still saying it's better to believe that pee is not stored in the balls, and that's a subjective.
It's
claim.
more true that pee is not stored in the balls.
And now we're begging the question about what the whole conversation is about.
I kind of disagree, but I'm assuming there's more like super chats or.
It's a yeah. Sorry, I don't want to.
Sorry, yeah. Away from it. There's a couple more here to get to. One here was Prince of Dogs just said, "All right, sorry for the dog meme. Thank you very much, dogs. I appreciate it big time." Then we got $5 from Bobby Ballbag. Says, "Is it moral to convince someone against a belief in Christ?"
It depends. Well, that's probably for you. Sorry.
Oh, is it moral to convince somebody against a belief in Christ? Of course not.
You don't believe in invincible ignorance?
Invincible ignorance? Can you? What is that? I don't know what that is.
So I think it's more of a Catholic thing, so you probably do reject it. So, if somebody was born like deaf, dumb, and blind, and they lived to be like 20 years old, but they were completely disabled and never were able to, they're basically a vegetable their whole life, and then they die, do they go to hell?
No.
Okay, so that's like an example of invincible ignorance, because they can't reject Christ, because they never like heard the scripture.
I could never convince them of anything, so what does that have to do with the super chat?
Well, what about the Native Americans before Columbus?
Well, thank God Columbus came.
Right. So there's really no pathway to the person that didn't have access to the scriptures gets to go to heaven.
No,
but the people that didn't have access to scriptures go to hell. There's no logical path to that. There's no logical harmony to that. Invincible ignorance is the idea of, look, if you're a good person and you never hear the scriptures, you are not at fault for that. There's nothing. Whatever. Now, maybe you think in the rapture, tribulation, whatever, they're all in Gehenna.
None of that dispensationalist garbage. We don't believe in any of that. So, first of all, something that's different, I'm sure you probably engage with a lot of Protestants, like evangelicals. We don't go around making judgment claims on people's eternity. That's God's business, not ours. We know where grace is. We don't know where it isn't. We know where salvation is. We don't know, we know some cases where it isn't, but we have the normative means of salvation. If God chooses to save somebody through other means, that's God's business. We don't make these declarative claims about what God will and won't do. God is ultimate justice. So if it's justice for somebody, I would say, that doesn't ever have contact with the scripture, of course, they're not going to be, they do have the forgiveness of their ignorance. That is something that we would hold to.
Well, except you seem to very implicitly imply that all the pre-contact Native Americans are burning in hell.
When have I ever said that?
because when I asked you about them, you said, well, good thing Columbus came over.
Well, yeah, I think that people should be exposed to the gospel so they can have the normative means, because I think there's so much, because again, not a Protestant, we don't believe
So
that
here's-
being saved, hold on, let me finish. We don't believe that
sure.
being saved is like this declarative statement that you just go about your life. We think that the church is a transformative process, and that it will make, you'll become sanctified, and you'll acquire virtues that you wouldn't have before, and that's always a better case. Okay, so of course, thank God they would be exposed to any form of a gospel, and then hopefully led to the true gospel. But if it is the case that they don't have that being exposed, God's going to handle them justly.
Sure. So what's actually really funny about this is how it can lead to a really weird kind of, not really a logical problem, but like we're going back to pragmatics, which is hilarious, but a very strange pragmatic thing. If you do believe in invincible ignorance, because nobody, even the people that think everybody who's not a Christian goes to hell no matter what, for whatever reason, like they say that, but they don't think that, most pregnancy implantations fail. But according to your worldview, that's a human being, but it never knew Christ. So does it go to hell? None of them think that, right? Mm-hmm. So if invincible ignorance is a thing, and now if you extend that to, look, the people that God put them in a part of the world where the scripture would never reach them, it can't be their fault. God can't punish them for eternity in hell. Like, that's a popular belief, right? Mm-hmm. So if that's the case, then this question has a very weird answer. What would actually be totally righteous to do is to either eradicate all humanity, because then nobody else would ever go to hell, or completely destroy all knowledge of Christianity so that everybody in infinite or invincible ignorance could also not go to hell.
Okay, I want to say this with all due respect and all politeness in my heart. This is extremely low tier Christian criticisms, okay? So, first of all, this invincible ignorance thing you're talking about, your Helen Keller subject couldn't possibly be convinced. When we say that God will act justly, it doesn't mean that because they didn't receive the gospel and God's not going to blame them for that they now get a free ticket to heaven. They're still going to be judged on Judgment Day according to their deeds, because ultimately salvation for us, being united with Christ, is a disposition of the heart.
So faith plus works? That's Catholic.
We are Catholic. We're the Orthodox Catholic. We're not Roman.
Well, okay. You're not Roman Catholic. You're right. Okay.
Franco-Papist. Yeah. So, we're the true Catholics. So, yes, we believe in a...
No, they are. Because they say so.
Well, they're wrong. So, anyway.
Yeah, because you say so, yeah.
No, I have arguments. Are we having that debate right now, Peterson?
I'm sorry. I strawmanned you because men in funny hats say so, not because you say so. Men in funny hats who lived in Greece 1800 years ago said so. That's why.
Well, again, we would totally do. I would love to have this kind of deconstruction zone, Justin deconstruction zone type debate with you. We're happy to set it up. But what I would say is that they're still going to be judged according to their heart, according to if good is the nature of God. And there are people whose hearts aligned and were parallel to God's own heart. He's going to judge each individual accordingly. So this idea that, well, it'd be better if everybody who doesn't hear the gospel gets a free ticket to heaven. So we should either, not spread the gospel to anybody, or everybody should be innocently eradicated. That's like totally preposterous.
No, not in a pragmatic sense. Do you think that if you had 1 million random people, that have no idea that Jesus ever existed, 1 million random people, mm-hmm. What percentage of them would you guess have good enough hearts to enter the kingdom of heaven?
I have no idea. That's not my place to say.
Do you think that it would be okay? So if we took 1 million random people from somewhere in the world that have never heard about the Bible, and we introduced them to the Bible, what percentage of them do you think would be convinced of it?
If we just gave them Bibles and no normative authority and no Orthodox Church, I don't think it would end very well.
Okay, so which number do you think is bigger? The number of people that are going to have the right heart despite their ignorance, or the number of people that are going to hear about it and be like,
actually, in this,
well, now that I've heard about it, I'm rejecting it, so I automatically go to hell.
I'm gonna be honest. So again, this is why your idea of what a Christian is, and I was kind of serious. I think that the Orthodox Church is the one true church. I don't think that you can divorce. I think you can colloquially call people Christian, but if they're divorced from the church that produced Christianity and holds the normative authority, they become atheist factories. And I think they also become heresy factories. So in a weird way, in this particular analogy, you have a bunch of people who have never heard of Jesus. And now you have a bunch of people that are just given a book with no instruction, no normative authority. They read about Jesus, and now they're coming to potentially heretical or blasphemous conclusions. Yeah, it actually would be better if they weren't given the Bible without the normative authority that produced the Bible and gives the teachings of the Bible. So yeah, I actually think it would be better if they didn't just, but your whole analogy is just handing them Bibles like the Bible does this magic thing to teach you Christianity. Again, you're only dealing with evangelicals. As an Orthodox Christian, we don't believe that the Bible is some private devotional book. We think it's a liturgical document that can't be divorced from the liturgy that it was meant to be applied with, and the teaching and the bishops and the apostolic succession and the grace that the church has. The church is the body of Christ on earth. So that's, you can't divorce that from its from where the grace is.
Yeah, I mean, sure, but short of by unrelenting totalitarian force, you can't conquer the world and make sure everybody does it the proper way. There's going to be all these other denominations or whatever. So it's actually perfectly fair to say, look, what would actually cause more people to go to heaven? People just universally, just it being up to their good nature or whatever. Or if we introduce it to everybody, there's going to be a subset that are going to be like, a talking snake. I don't believe it. I don't believe in that. Or all the other denominations that don't do it the proper way, and it leads to rejection. Then that can actually lead to more people going to hell. So it's a very odd.
No, because again, this is a paradigm level problem. I believe that people left up to their own devices are going to, because of the fallen state of nature, are going to succumb to vice, hedonism, far more than whenever they're given a set of accountability. But that isn't, like, maybe some people, if you did an experiment with a bunch of people with just a Bible, some would derive these things. Others would have heresies. That's why we had so many heresies in the first 4 or 5 centuries of Christendom. But if you're actually talking about Christianity proper, the way that my paradigm describes it, you introduce the Orthodox Church and the sacrament of confession and the sacrament of communion. They're going to have grace in their life, which is going to cause a transformation. They're going to have a normative authority by which to bring their questions, bring their problems of ethics to, and you're now going to have a flourishing of virtues that you wouldn't have otherwise.
Sure. So that went on for way too long. But the answer to this question, if you ask me, is possibly.
Like I said, if you're just Bibles in their hand, it's worse.
We have 2 more super chats here. Re-examination show came in with another 5 to say whether you can accomplish your goal is irrelevant if your goal and the contrary to your goal have equal value.
Yeah, so establishing a normative, pragmatic framework is not the same thing as assigning a value judgment to them. There is no sense in which it is objectively more true that you ought to win the Daytona 500 than you ought to come in last. So this is just, it's just really not all that interesting. But even if God does exist and is morally perfect, why ought I follow him? No, you can't derive the ought from that is, unless you just don't want to suffer.
It's just a straw man of the position. And what he's talking about in this is that if your goal, if you have a goal and then there's the contrary to the goal, and those are both just determined input output reactions from your worldview, you have to give a special category to the goal that has a value that we ought to do. And if it's a subjective value, it's just your preference, then ultimately the goal of coming to the truth of the matter becomes subjective, and the actual truth of the matter itself become subjective because you can't even point to an actual objective truth of the matter in your worldview. So all you have is, well, I have this goal to come to a pragmatic evidentialist conclusion, but without an actual objective notion of what truth is, like, again, ontologically, then you have no basis by which to apply a special category to your particular determined output of finding what you call the truth.
All right. And then the last one comes in from a Bobby Ballbag, says 100% my pee is stored in my ball bag.
He is stored in the balls funny. Is never not funny.
So that right there is going to wrap up our Q&A for tonight. Thank you to everyone in the live chat for all the questions, the engagement, the support. It's what helps me keep bringing you these debates and the entire Swords of Reason experience week after week. I appreciate every single one of you. And, of course, a huge thank you to our debaters for stepping into the arena tonight and sharpening their ideas in front of us all. Before we move on real quick, let me check. Are either of you planning to hang out for the open panel?
No, I can't. I will. I haven't even had dinner.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Yeah, I know you just got off work and came.
Yeah, I literally went from work, opened the door. The front door is right there. I can almost touch it. Sat down, clicked the stream link thing. I was like, all right, well, shit, let's do this. Get a free book, 2 free audiobooks, and ad-free videos by becoming a Patreon member.